Okay, we're a couple of days out from the start of the English domestic season. We're in the writing room at Lord's for reasons that will become apparent shortly. It's a beautiful day. Groundsmen are out there putting water on the square. It's been a pretty dry March, so there might be some decent batting conditions around. Middlesex play Lancashire here in 2 days' time.
The weather is perfect, isn't it? I mean, we used to play, I don't know, you wouldn't have played it because it was the Champions County against the MCC, so you never won the county championship. But we at Essex used to come here around about this time of year. It used to be absolutely freezing for that sort of season opener. This weather is perfect, but it's going to be without Jimmy Anderson.
We're right behind the pitch here that they're going to play on Friday, and I walked over from the media centre.
Did he allow you to walk over?
He allowed me to walk over, and it's quite green. And I suspect, given the news about Jimmy Anderson, they won't be cutting it. Had Jimmy been fit and ready to go, they might have just shaved it down a little bit. But he's got an old man's injury. He's gone in the calf.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I'm sure the Middlesex batters are really gutted about that. Having said that it's a bit green and it might do a bit, I've been watching like the warm-up games and stuff. There's been some big scores. There's not been many wickets.
Although not for Zach Crawley, who I noticed got a blunder against the students of Loughborough. He left a straight one.
There's not a pod that goes through without you giving that little dig at Zach Crawley. So no, Jimmy. Kane Williamson, has he arrived yet?
No, not here yet. So, but he's a big name.
Yeah.
Middlesex have made a couple of signings. Chelmsford, Surrey going for a 4-timer.
Yeah.
They're starting off at Chelmsford this year.
Two big hitters of domestic cricket, Essex against Surrey. No, Anthony McGrary's made the journey back up north.
And they've appointed Johnny Bairstow as captain for Yorkshire. So
I think that's the right time for Johnny, wouldn't you say? He said he wants to carry on playing for England. He's on a central contract or whatever. But I think at this stage of his career, to have something, and obviously the history, I know we're going to talk a little bit about red ball cricket and what happened with South Australia winning the Shield final. I think domestic cricket and county cricket and red ball cricket, there is that connection with the past. Jake Lehman, Darren Lehman, Johnny Bairstow with his dad and everything, and great history of the game, especially up there at that county.
I just had an image then. I played against his dad when his dad was captain of Yorkshire in one Roses match on a really green, spicy pitch at Headingley. And miraculously, myself and Gian Mendes got to, 150 or something without losing a wicket. And Johnny's dad was so frustrated behind the stumps as captain wicketkeeper. He threw down his gloves and took off his pads and demanded the ball from Arnie Sidebottom and came charging in down the hill.
Talking about playing fast-ish bowling, sad news recently about Peter Lever. I read your post on how he taught you and about playing fast bowling. You knew him well. We knew him from the England setup, but
he was coach at a difficult time for Lancashire in those mid-1980s when the club was going through some difficulties before I started. But as part of his role as coach, he tried to get together a group of fast bowlers, young kids, kind of 15, 16, 17-year-olds. And he needed a couple of batters to face them. But because I don't know whether you remember the old indoor school at Old Trafford, which had very short run-ups, which meant they allowed the bowlers to bowl off kind of 16 yards. And these lads, there was one lad called Alan Turner, the Royton Rocket, who he was quicker than anything I faced later on in first-class cricket. So, and as you know, each step up when you go from schoolboy level to first-class cricket, the change is pace of the game, really, pace of the game. So to have for 2 years before I became a professional at Lancashire, to have those nights in the indoor school in winter evenings where you're getting attuned to and accustomed to pace, actually played a big part in enabling me to kind of make the transition fairly easily, because as you'll remember, every team had an overseas fast bowler in those days. You mentioned the Sheffield Shield. Great scenes at the Karen Rolton Oval in Adelaide, South Australia winning the comp for the first time in almost 3 decades, but looked like a full house on. Fantastic scenes when they won that. And you mentioned about red ball cricket around the world. In some countries, it's kind of hanging on in there, holding back the tide of franchise and T20 cricket, but not all parts of the world.
No, I think the big three, obviously England, as we're just about to start in a couple of days' time. India, their board are very keen on their players. We had Dinesh Karthik on the pod, and the impact it had for them to go off and play in Ranji Trophy cricket, and obviously the scenes in Australia. Whether that's going to be transmitted all around the world, who knows? Whether the finances are viable. So, but I love that. I knew David Hooks quite well. My first trip to Australia, I played in South Australia at Adelaide Uni. Your boy's just been out there. I didn't get a run at all.
Said you got more parking tickets than runs.
I bagged a pair my first weekend. It was weekend to weekend, and David Hooks absolutely tore a piece off me. And there was a great picture of him overlooking that Shield final. And that's my point about the connection to the past. I don't know how you watch it. I do follow it now. So come Friday, wherever I'll be, I'll see how are Essex going against Surrey on my phone. The great thing about social media now, you'll see all the wickets. So that's how I follow. The streams are magnificent. So I do still keep my eye across, for not just for the job I'm in, but because I love Essex and I want to see how some of the counties and some of the players are going.
So that's the start of the domestic season, which is a couple of days away. We wish all the players well for the start of that. And Surrey, can't wish them well for a four-timer. Somebody's going to have to overhaul them this year. But it's also a fascinating time for the women's game. The 8 Tier 1 teams will get cracking this year. Obviously, the England team has undergone a bit of upheaval after a disappointing winter and a thrashing in the Ashes. All change at the top. New head coach, and there'll be a new captain, and we're delighted to say that Charlotte Edwards, the new coach, has joined us on the podcast. Charlotte, welcome. Congratulations, first of all. Is this a good time to be taking over as head coach of the women's team, given that the team is in a little bit of turmoil and that it seems that there's only one way you can go?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, once I got the call and asked if I wanted to have the role, I was straight away a yes, because I just felt it was the right time for me. And I think where the team are at the moment is a good time for me to take over. So, I'm really, really excited about the role. I mean, obviously I've played for a number of years. I've had 8 or 9 years out of the team now, doing various different coaching roles. And yeah, it just feels the right time for me.
Well, Charlotte, I'm going to pump your tyres here. Hugely impressive CV you have. Charlotte Edwards, 309 appearances for England, 220 games as England captain, 5-time Ashes winner, 2-time World Cup winner, 5 domestic titles as coach, 2-time WPL winning coach, and obviously the 100 winning coach as well. Is it those last few domestic titles and your time in domestic cricket that has made you think this is the right time to take the job, because you didn't want it a few years ago when it was available?
Yeah, I think experience and confidence. I think going away and coaching the Sydney Sixers, with the likes of Healy, Perry, Gardner in that team, Mumbai Indians with all their players, I think it's just enabled me to, I guess, gain real experience, certainly under high pressure. And yeah, I think it's really prepared me for this role now. I just feel absolutely ready to take on an international role. It's always been my ambition, and I feel, I think there's never great timing, but obviously 2 weeks out from the county season, I thought I was going to be coaching Hampshire in a couple of weeks, but I'm very lucky that they've obviously let me take on this role. But yeah, it's definitely the right time for me.
You said that you've always had ambitions for an international role, but the way the game is changing so rapidly, they're not always now considered the plum jobs. I mean, you had a nice CV, didn't you? Coaching with Sydney and Mumbai and Hampshire. A lot of people would say that's actually a nicer gig than maybe the international team. Was it a completely straightforward decision then, or did you have to kind of just talk it through to yourself?
I think it was straightforward. I think, I care enormously about England. You don't play for 20 years and suddenly just hang up your boots and not care about England cricket. I sat and watched the Ashes like everyone else, and it was hard to watch. I was disappointed. So yeah, it was really clear to me that I wanted to do the role if it was to become available, and obviously to be asked to do it. I feel incredibly privileged to be asked.
Some good reaction out there as well. I see Elise Perry was very, very grateful. She said, one of the biggest highlights of my career was working with you, Charlotte Edwards. Have you had some good reaction from the players that you have coached?
To be fair, it's been really overwhelming the last sort of 24 hours because, I picked up my phone about 4:00 yesterday. There was 300 messages on my phone. So, and a lot of them from players. So that kind of, I guess that is a mark of, how much I'm respected within the game. And obviously still asking if I'm going to do franchise cricket. I actually spoke to Elise yesterday morning because I wanted to tell her myself, and I wanted to tell a number of people myself because, I did love all the roles, Sydney, Mumbai. I had a wonderful experience there, and obviously won 2 titles. But, I guess the attraction of this role, what's coming up, a 50-over World Cup, a T20 World Cup at home, an Olympics, I can't turn down that. That's, with wearing the 3 lions again, for me, means everything. So, I'm just, super excited now.
Can we just chat about Heather for a little bit? You've been appointed after the decision was made to obviously, first of all, get rid of John Lewis and then get rid of Heather as captain. Would it have been sensible to appoint the coach first and then make the decision on the captain?
Well, first, it's not really my decision. Obviously, the ECB did their review and I think they were, pretty clear what they wanted to do. They wanted a leadership reset. And I was asked after that. So, yeah.
Do you agree with that? Was it the right decision?
Well, I mean, I haven't seen the review and I think that's something I want to see actually over the next sort of couple of weeks because I kind of want to know exactly, what the reaction was to the winter because I think that's important for me to know moving forward. I mean, I've got my own views and I was part of that review as well, which was really important because I feel, and that's why I publicly said I wanted to help because I felt there was lots of stuff I had learned from certainly playing around the world, coaching, and being involved at Hampshire in the domestic setup. I knew there's sort of things we could really improve on that would, I think, make England cricket, better in many ways. So I obviously wasn't involved in that decision, but I guess the leadership reset is what the team needs.
I'm sure you'd like to pay tribute to Heather as well. I mean, England have only had 3 captains since the turn of the century, all highly decorated in a way. Has the job got a bit tougher since perhaps you and Claire were doing it, in the sense that the women's game is much more professional now? There's much more scrutiny, perhaps much more expectation as well. Is it a tougher job now, and how well or otherwise did Heather do it?
Yeah, she did an amazing job, and to do it for 9 years under more scrutiny than myself and Claire had was incredible. And I really felt for her after the Ashes. I actually texted her after the last game because she's actually batting as well as I've ever seen Heather, and you do take it personally. Whatever you say as a captain, you take it personally, and I really, really felt for her. And she did look very tired, and I felt like it had the feeling that she was going to potentially step down, but yeah, I mean, she did an amazing job. Obviously won the World Cup out here in 2017, and I think we're very lucky to still have Heather Knight in the team, and I think that's one thing I'm really pleased about because she is the ultimate professional in my eyes, someone who I want around this England group to share her experiences, her leadership. So yeah, I think the best is yet to come still from Heather.
What did you make of England in the Ashes? Were you expecting them to go there and win, or were you if not, were you expecting them to lose 16-0 as they did? What did you make of it?
I wasn't expecting them to lose 16-0. I thought it was going to be close. I know how much Australia regard England. They really do know that this England team is a good team. Basically, the first two games, I think the game at Melbourne was probably the moment where I think, things unravelled really. I think not to chase that 180, and I think it just gave the Australians momentum, and they just ran with it. So I think what surprised me probably was, the scrutiny the team were under. Obviously, the fielding wasn't particularly great, and you could see the lack of confidence by the end of the trip. So, yeah, it was hard to watch.
You've got to pick a new captain, or indeed captains. What's your thinking at the moment?
I've got a clear idea. I've got a few meetings over the next week, and I want this person announced pretty quickly. It will be one captain. So yeah.
That kind of narrows it down, because you haven't actually got that many players who are multi-format, have you?
No.
All three formats.
Yeah. But no, I think for me, it's got to be across the whiteboard stuff. There's got to be one person, but I think we've got a little bit of time, but in the next 10 days, hopefully.
Two areas that the team were highly criticised for in Australia. You mentioned that the fitness and the fielding, and then the second aspect, I suppose, was the kind of what seemed to be a bit of a blow up between Sophie and Alex Hartley, which all comes around media scrutiny. Do you think those criticisms of the team were fair enough?
Yeah, I think they were. I think what we need to do moving forward is be more honest. I think I'm certainly going to be honest with the players, and I want them to be honest with themselves. And we've got to work really hard. We are behind Australia, and we've got to be honest about that. I think some of the things that happened in Australia, I think for me now it's about England players understanding their responsibilities in England cricketers, and I think that's going to be such an important part of my role. We've got a lot of young players who've grown up in not a professional environment, and so I think setting those professional standards is going to be really important. So I think and in terms of the fitness side of things, I think I'm with the team next week. I'll judge their fitness standards then, but they will be made more accountable for fitness. I can't have conversations about fitness with an England cricket team. It's just a non-negotiable for me. So that'll be my stance moving forward.
You've always been pretty ruthless as a player, captain, and now coach, and you're talking as if you're going to be ruthless on fitness there. But what do you do when some of your better players, some of your best players, not just fitness, but aren't mobile in the field? You're a better side for having those great players in your team. You can't leave them out. What do you do?
I think they're conversations you've got to have. You've got to build relationships with these players to actually them understand the importance of that area of the game now. And fitness is an individual thing. We're not expecting everyone to run whatever at certain times, but I think as long as you're fit for purpose, you're buying into the team culture, and you're working as hard as you possibly can. I was never the fittest, but I worked as hard as I possibly could, and that's going to be the message. I just want everyone working as hard as they possibly can. So when they walk out on the field, there's just no regrets. There's nothing being put into question.
Well, I could use you as a good example, because towards the end of your career, you were struggling. You were struggling with your knees. You were struggling to move, but you're still the best player in the team. Would you have left Charlotte Edwards out?
Probably now. But you know what? That was really good for me. I think the last year of my playing career was probably really good for me. One, I really understood the importance of fitness, certainly at T20 level. It's so important. And I've always said to players now, I'm never going to let that be an issue for any of the players that work under me, because I think that's something we've got to instill in the youngsters really early. And that's the conversations we're going to be having with counties now, is that we're instilling these really good behaviours in players. So I think that's part of my job now. It's not just at the England level. It's feeding all of this down. So when they play for England, they're absolutely ready to perform.
The other slight criticism of this team is that they are very good in bilateral cricket. They go around thumping people all around the world, generally around the world. But then the pressure and the bar is raised. So you get Commonwealth Games here in England, didn't get a medal in that. You get a semi-final against South Africa in Cape Town. They lose that. What was a knockout game in Dubai against the West Indies, a side they hammer in bilateral cricket. Under pressure, they drop catches and lose that. Is there an issue with handling of pressure in those key moments?
Well, yes, there is, because, that's clear. But the way we rectify that is I believe we get them playing more. We get them having to perform at domestic cricket. And we keep putting them in those pressure situations so when they do play for England, it's not alien to them. And I think it is quite a simple fix for me. I think a boy at the same age as a girl play so much more cricket, where some of the players in women's cricket don't have that exposure. And I think what I want to do now is make sure that they're playing a lot more cricket, and certainly the 50 over game, because I think that's where you learn about your game awareness, etc. So so that's going to be a theme moving forward. And and performances count now. Selection will be done on performance rather than potential or younger players, because they bowl left arm, or it's going to be probably give a lot more hope to a lot of more county players that the door isn't shut for anyone.
Can I ask about your coaching philosophy a little bit? In the winter, I think the phrase "Bazball life" was used about the England women's team and John Lewis's philosophy, and it's a conversation that happens around the men's team as well. This balance between entertaining, playing bright, attractive cricket, and winning, and some of the language is not always reflected, I think, what the players think. But where do you stand on that kind of balance between entertaining and winning?
I think there's a lot we can take from that, and I think I've said publicly, I think there's a lot I want to sort of bottle from the way the players have played over the last couple of years, because I think they've certainly seen what they can do. What I've got to try and do is, I guess, build that game awareness piece in there, because ultimately international cricket, well, any game of cricket I played in, was about winning. And I'm not going to be scared to say I want to win. And I think what we've got to try and get players to do is learn how to win. And that might be a different situation every time they play. I feel like recently there's been one way of playing, and that's the only way they can play. And I think I want to try and produce intelligent players that win games for England. And I think that's something I can really help with.
You played with quite a few of the players that you're going to be coaching now, some of the older players in the team. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage?
I think it's an advantage. I think I've also worked with them a lot now through my coaching career. I think that's been a real benefit to me. I actually think the last couple of years working, with Nat at the Mumbai Indians, getting to know Nat since she's obviously, become a world superstar. It's been so lovely to see her development, and her probably see me in a slightly different light as well, because I'm a much better coach than I was captain, for sure. I feel really confident now walking into that dressing room that they know me as the coach now, and not Lottie as the captain.
That's the top end, the greats that you've played with, like Nat Brunt. But what about the other advantage is that you have done your time in domestic cricket, so you know the talent, you know the system, you know the structure, and you know what needs to be done at those grassroots levels to get people through.
Yeah, and that's probably been one of my biggest strengths early on, was developing young players. I think, working with the likes of Charlie Dean, Lauren Bell, Maya Bouchier, in the Freya Kemp, at Hampshire, and them going on to play for England. That's important to me, and I feel that's probably one of my real strengths. But then obviously the last 3 years having that experience working with the top end players has really helped me. So I think I'm more of a more rounded coach now, so I can sort of different styles for different age groups. And this team has got quite a disparity in some senior players, but then some real youngsters, and that's what I'm really looking forward to. Is it's quite a good group to work with in that sense.
Strength or otherwise of the national team often reflects what's happening below. It's quite an important time for women's cricket, the start of a new structure, a new system, the 8 Tier 1 teams. I mean, what are your thoughts on the strength or otherwise of domestic cricket right now, where it stands right now?
It's really strong, and I'm so proud of our domestic scene at the moment. I think, I've lived and breathed it for 5 years. I've been at every game for the last 5 years, and I'll continue to be at every game I possibly can over the next few weeks as well. I think that's what I didn't want to come out of the review from the winter, was that we're not in a good place, because we are. I think actually Australia are actually quite envious of our domestic structure. I think we've got it right. We've got now more contracts in place. We play more cricket than them. We play a variety of cricket. which is great. So that's why I think this role, me coming into this role, is so important as well, because I understand that part of the game and I know what's needed, and I'm going to work really close with all the county coaches to enable us all to work together, because I think that's going to be right and important for the success of the England team.
Let's be positive, because you can list a whole heap of very, very fine, if not great, cricketers that are around the England setup. Is it dangerous that, like we used to in the men's game, sometimes you overreact after an Ashes drubbing and you throw everything out? I don't know the results of that review. I hope it'll be made public. But there are a lot of good things and some very, very fine players in the England setup. So what is your mindset coming in? Is it a tinkering job? Is it let's just wait and see? Or are you completely ruthless, clean sweep, and we're going in a completely different direction?
No, I don't feel like we need to go in a completely direction. I think it's about tinkering, just resetting a few things. I think my main focus is going to be our 50-over game, is understanding a blueprint that's going to be successful for us in a World Cup in India, instilling that really quickly, drip feeding that down to counties to say this is how, we want to play as an England team. So yeah, I think there's some real quick fixes here, and that's what excites me the most. Is that I don't think it's a big overhaul. It's just some fine tuning, and I think hopefully we will be back on track.
The weather's pretty seasonal right now. We're just a couple of days away from the start of the men's season. You're looking forward to series against West Indies, India, and then the World Cup. Just kind of cast your eye over what's to come for the season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the West Indies is my first series as coach, so I'm really looking forward to that. I actually think it's a really nice progression through the summer. They're going to be a strong team. They've obviously got some of their big hitters back. India will be a massive challenge leading into the World Cup, and then a World Cup in India, which obviously spent a lot of time out there. So I've got good knowledge of their players, etc. So I think it's a really nice leading, and something we're all looking forward to.
And the difference, I mean, you obviously haven't done the job yet, but what do you think the difference is? I'm thinking of your time and what you would be doing if you were still at Hampshire. You'd be rushing down there, keeping an eye on time and making sure everyone was on time. The difference between a domestic coach, a franchise coach, and an international coach, what is that difference, do you think?
I think I'm definitely going to have more time on my hands.
Is that a good thing or not?
Yeah, I think, because I think this is going to give me greater focus. I think that's what I was probably screaming out for, if I'm honest. I like a project, and this is a big project for me and something I could really get my teeth into. And I think the strategy side of things as well is really excites me about planning for those big world events. I'll tell you in a few months how I'm getting on, because I think I will be. You think in a domestic summer I'm at pretty much 45 games of cricket. I might only have 20 games of England cricket a year, but those games are big, and that preparation. But I'm really looking forward to that, having one focus, one purpose, and I'm ready to go.
And worldwide, where the game is, the women's game, from what you had to go through, where you were, and all the challenges you face, to what you see now, and those crowds in the WPL, the crowds in the 100, it has changed. Is it unstoppable now?
I think so. I go every year thinking, wow, this is amazing. I sit in dugouts and I sometimes have to pinch myself to think, I'm sitting in these dugouts and seeing the crowds and the excitement around women's cricket right now. So, I hope, people keep supporting. I hope all of the England games this summer are going to be sold out, because, that's what I think the game deserves now. And it's pretty exciting to be involved.
So a whirlwind couple of weeks then, telling all your franchise owners that you've finished with them, accepting the job that you've dreamt about, I suppose, since stepping down from as a player. So we wish you well. Hope it's a successful time. It's a fantastic time for the women's game, and we hope you bring the good times back to the team. Good luck.
Thank you.
It seems like the obvious appointment was made. They institute a review, and then it seemed obvious from way out that it was going to be Charlotte Edwards. In fact, I listened briefly to Claire Connor when she was talking with Charlotte to the media just before our podcast, and she said that they didn't really have a formal process for appointing a coach in a normal way, that you'd, open the job for applications and then interview people. So it just seemed as though, Claire knew who she wanted and got
a little bit more than you'd say about the captaincy. One thing you could be critical of England in the last few years, they've not had the succession planning.
Yeah, I mean, scratching our heads thinking who's going to be the next captain. In a way, that implies a bit of criticism around the succession plan.
Yeah, and also how good Heather Knight was, really. And it was noticeable in the game in Dubai against the West Indies when she went off, and everything imploded from there. So that's the very most important decision to make. As a captain coach, that partnership they form, they've got the spot on person with Charlotte Edwards. Sometimes you get great players that don't make great coaches, or sometimes in Duncan Fletcher's case, you have great coaches that he never played Test match cricket, so he didn't play that much international cricket. In this particular case, I think you've got a great player and what could be a great coach. At the moment in domestic cricket, she's done nearly everything.
I wanted to ask her, actually, she made that comment about she thinks she's a better coach than she was a captain. I wanted to butt in at that point, perhaps I should have done, but what did you make of that?
I think she's quite honest with herself about her career, looking back as to what type of player she was, what she had to go through, what type of captain she was. And I think she's actually bigging herself up a little bit, that she's actually quite impressed herself at what she's had to do. It can't be easy being a coach, here in England, and then for Hampshire, and then you're doing the Southern Brave, and then you got to go and do WPO. It's not easy being a franchise, popping in, seeing a different group of players. And the list of stats I read out and the domestic title she's won, she's become a serial winner. She's lost some as well. She got to 2 finals in the 100 and didn't get them over the line. So I think the other interesting thing is like the fitness, and it has been highlighted. And is it easier, do you think, for a female coach, a woman, to have those difficult conversations than maybe a man to have with her?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think it's absolutely right. And it has to be easier. Those conversations have to be easier. And I think it's the right time for her now. As you mentioned, she said in 2022, when the job last became available, that she didn't really feel as though she had the requisite amount of experience.
Do you know why I think she's the top person for it? Is because if you ask me one word about Charlotte Edwards, I would say tough. Right? And sometimes you say that about cricketers, and people used to call me nuggety or whatever. That means rubbish, right? But with Charlotte, I use that as a compliment. The things that she would have had to go through in a completely different era of cricket, and the things that she did, and the achievements she got. When I watched her play and captain Echo, I think she's a tough person, character. And I think that's what they need a little bit now. They need a bit of tough love, because I don't think they're in a situation where they haven't got good players. They've got some watching Nat Sciver-Brunt in the recent WPL, Sophie Eccleston, they've got some very, very fine players. They just need a bit of tough love, because the problem with being an England women's cricketer is that you hammer everyone. You beat a lot of sides, and then the bar is raised. You're in a knockout, like I spoke to her about. You're in a knockout game, and there is no tomorrow. You've got to win, and you're under pressure. Or you're playing Australia, and now it's, oh my gosh, this is slightly harder. And that's where they've been found wanting. So you go from, and I'm not saying coasting, I'm not saying they are coasting, but you go from that level and you're beating a lot of sides and doing really well, and at the top of your game, and everyone wants to know you, and then suddenly, bang, it's 16-0, and it was like a wake-up call for English cricket, that you can stay here if you want, but how are you going to get from here to there? Because remember also, with that, India are going like that, South Africa have done very, very well recently, other sides are catching up.
Therefore, do you think, I mentioned to her that there's only been 3 captains in the last, 20, 25 years, so Heather was there for 9 years, and, the Charlotte before her, Claire before her, long periods of time. Do you think because of those generally rising standards and the greater level of scrutiny now as the game becomes more professional, do you think that stability or longevity for captains and coaches may be a thing of the past, and it goes more like it is?
I actually hope so.
Now.
I actually hope so, because what that will mean is that the standards across the board are rising, that there is no given of winning a bilateral series. It's not just you turn up, England will play certain sides, Bangladesh, Pakistan, whoever, and you turn up, and I turn up and watch, and I go, I think I know who's going to win this game. And if you look at Heather Knight's record as a captain, if you look at John Lewis's record as a coach, he would have never been sacked after the Ashes, maybe, like most are, but his record was phenomenal because you are winning so much. Now, that can't be a good... I've always felt that's where the women's international game needs to improve, is that across the board standards are going up. Then you are losing more games, and then there is more scrutiny. And with that scrutiny comes, I think you said it on one of our pods, maybe through when we did it in the Ashes, it's a good sign for the women's game that there was that spat between Hartley and Sophie Ecclestone, because it shows that the media scrutiny shows how far the women's game has come, that broadcasters and pundits aren't just sort of shying away from calling out, you're not quite good enough at the moment, you need to improve.
Well, Charlotte's first game in charge of the women's team will be at Canterbury on May the 21st. That's the day before the England men get underway, a test match, 4-day test actually, against Zimbabwe. So between now and then, 7 weeks of domestic cricket for the men and the women to impress their respective selectors.